welcome to Two Steps Ahead Podcast. Two Steps Ahead Podcast, highlighting the stuff we've stepped in so you don't have to. I'm Son Edom, alongside somebody who is probably, I would say, should be appreciative of the fact that it's April, that Santa is sequestered at the North Pole because she's on the naughty list because she recommended to me a documentary. And it's something that we're going to discuss a little bit about today and use it as a launching pad. It's Tiger Queen Tara.
Yes. Hey, guys. Welcome back. I'm Tara Hoke-Shiro. How are you?
Hey, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you. Today is my birthday.
Yeah, special day. She's 21 again.
Again.
And are you feeling any wiser?
No,
They say with age comes wisdom.
With age comes wisdom. I feel just as wise today as I did yesterday.
That's good.
So, yes, I do.
Well, very good. Well, again, happy birthday. And so okay, Tiger King is a phenomena on Netflix that people are watching.
Yeah.
You were watching it. And I really wasn't interested in it at all because I've heard people tell me not to watch it because it's kind of, in their opinion, it was a waste of their time. But you started watching it and sent me a message or two. And then I thought, well, maybe it's something that we can kind of utilize to talk about some things in life because, you know, it's a phenomenon that a lot of people are watching. If you haven't watched it, it's up to you. I'm not going to give any recommendations. Let's just put it this way. I watched 10 minutes of the first episode. I was done. I was done. I'm like 10 minutes. I can't do anymore. Then she suggested or said that episode 4 that they were watching was a good episode. So I turned to episode 4. I think I got to 15 minutes. Then I'm like, okay, I'm going to episode 7, the end, see what happens. And episode 7, not really to give you a spoiler alert, but it has a lot to do with more of the factual stuff, not the sensationalized lifestyle of Joe Exotic,
right? Or
Joe Erotic, whatever you want to call him. And so it's more of the factual stuff of what went on, which I found was kind of interesting because it had to deal with court cases and stuff like that. And so I got through most of that episode, and then I went to the internet and I looked up some articles about the spoiler alerts or what was sensational in other episodes that I could watch. And it talked about the guy who I guess was misgendered in the show as female. And so they kept calling it her, but it was actually a him.
Oh, it is. See, no, I didn't know that. I was watching the show and I'm thinking this whole time that it was a girl.
Well, it's a transgendered girl. She doesn't even consider herself transgender. She just considers herself a guy. And they've asked her about it in interviews and things like that. And she's like, well, it's just, she doesn't really think anything of it. So it wasn't a big deal to her, but she's a guy. Okay. And so he sticks his arm into a cage and it gets bitten off.
Yes.
Or gets, savaged by the tiger, ravaged. And he decides to amputate because he thought that the tigers, they would come in and take the tigers away and it caused this big brouhaha because the media was overhyping the whole thing due to the fact, and this is his words, because of the fact that of who Joe Exotic was.
Right.
And the media was overhyping it that she felt PETA would come in, or he felt PETA would come in and take away the tigers and stuff like that. So he decided to just amputate, and he was back at the zoo,
Quickly.
Anyways, so that's the extent I could muster just to get enough to talk about it. So obviously most of you by now will know what my thoughts are going to be on the show. But before I get into mine, what did you think of it? Did you get through the whole thing? I mean, did you watch all 7 episodes?
I did. I watched all 7 episodes. We have not watched the 8th episode just dropped, and so we haven't had a chance to watch that yet. But it's a train wreck that you just can't look away from, and it's so enticing in so many horrible ways that it just sucks you in. It sucks the chaos, the dysfunction. I think if somebody set out to script a reality show, this would be too far. People would say that just doesn't even make sense. How could people, so they're all felons, right? And they're all living together on this farm or this zoo. It was one zoo and now it's another zoo because Joe Exotic is in jail. So it has a different ownership. But yeah, it's fascinating, honestly. It's a great people watching show. If you like to people watch, which I love to people watch, it's fascinating to see how they relate and just step all over themselves, use each other, they exploit each other, they exploit the tigers, and I mean, you talk about self-imposed chaos. It's like you have the lady Carol
Baskin.
Carol Baskin, and then you have all the people at the zoo, and then you have the guy down in Florida with the ponytail. Is he in Florida?
I think he's in Florida as well.
Yeah, so they're in different states, all of them. Actually, he might be up north, but the guy with the blonde ponytail, and so all of them are just hugely dysfunctional, and the fact that they're bantering back and forth with each other, and enticing each other and provoking one another and up in the ante. Every day they just up the ante with each other. Just up the ante, up the ante, up the ante. And it's like, it's crazy.
So you found it easy to watch?
No, there were parts of it that was very disturbing, but I find it fascinating. Like the guy that was doing the reality TV show, he totally got screwed because you probably didn't see this part. It wasn't in the first 10 minutes, but the guy that was he started filming Joe Exotic's web show for the sole purpose so that he could get a reality show. So he wasn't really interested in helping. Wasn't interested in Joe's web show at all. But he's like, if I film the web show, then I'm going to have footage for a reality TV show. And that's really what I'm after. So it was 2 TV shows being filmed at the same time. And then at one point there was going to be some incrimination. And so Joe burned down the shed or the place where all of this footage where this guy had filmed incriminating evidence against him. He just burned it down. So there, and then again, I think in episode 7, the one that you saw, there was he burnt some more stuff. So everything is just literally and figuratively going up in flames. And it's fascinating how they all use each other. Like they want the story. They don't really care about each other, but they want the story. They want the fame. They want the notoriety. They're exploiting each other. And each party is just up in the ante, and the story just keeps getting bigger and more wild and crazy. And
see, I looked at it from the standpoint of first I thought it was sad because what I really like to talk about is the life we lead or the one life we can live. And to me, that was just a lot of wasted life.
Yeah.
And then 2, the fact that why would anybody, I can understand maybe the guy wanting a reality TV. And so he has to put up with all that stuff. But like, for example, the campaign manager, why did he stick around for a year and a half? At no point, I know he wanted to be a political science. He's a political science major and that was his thing he wanted to do. But are you kidding me? Do you really think that anybody is going to give you a shot at being a campaign manager once you campaign managed for Joe Exotic?
And the ironic thing about that is that in the beginning of that clip, when he was very first introduced, one of the first things that he said was, it was the worst year and a half of my life. But then later in the episodes, he's like practically crying that it's all over.
Yeah, I don't see.
I was like, wait a second.
See, I could not put up with that. I would first off, if I walked onto the zoo and was going to be a campaign manager or anything, and I'd get 5 minutes or, like I said, 10 minutes with the show, I'd walk. I could not put up with a year and a half of that.
Right.
I mean, that's just a waste of time.
But I think that's part of the fascination because they're all using each other and exploiting each other. He needed what he thought was street cred to be a campaign manager. And so that's why he stayed, even though it was craziness. Right. And so the reality TV guy, he's like, oh my gosh, you can't script this stuff. Like, this is a gold mine. So he was after the profit of these people's, train wreck. And so they all wanted something from each other that they couldn't get otherwise unless they used and exploited each other. But then their hatred of being used and exploited and being taken advantage of. So the very thing that they hate, they're encouraging because it's making them money and bringing them notoriety. So it's like rats eating eating themselves up. That's the fascinating part, is like they're all destroying each other so that they can each have notoriety and
fame. As a woman, what did you think about the fact that Jeff guy who came in later had his wife? And I don't know if this was...
She was in all the episodes. She was there from the beginning.
Okay, so I don't know if this is in the bonus episode, because I saw the bonus episode, but she gets pregnant, and they're talking about having a nanny, and he's like, okay, if she's going to have a nanny, I'm going to pick the nanny, and so he picks this really hot nanny.
Right.
Okay. So obviously he has no interest in the nanny from any other standpoint than a sexual standpoint.
Right.
And so,
And the wife is like putting up with it.
Yeah, and she's like okay with it.
Seemingly at this point, she's putting up with it. That's why it's just such a train wreck. It's just like one bad decision after another. And they're all just waiting to be caught or until it's over. Like they just can't go any further. It's just, that's the part to me, I think that's fascinating, that human beings would destroy themselves and be involved in so much self-imposed chaos.
And that's the thing. It's like, and getting back to kind of a broader picture, moving away from the show, not that we have to move away from the show, but just in life, we have one life to live, and we're going through a crisis right now where a lot of people are struggling either with the lockdown, or they're struggling with the illness, or they're struggling with knowing somebody that was sick and maybe didn't survive it. And so we have one life to live. And so what are we going to do with that life? And I look at these people and I'm like, this is the life that you choose for yourself. Now, granted, a couple of them, the polygamists, his husbands, whatever, Joe Exotic's husbands or whatever, obviously they, I think, had a drug addiction. And so they had access to drugs that Joe would give them to keep them around, and toys and stuff.
Right.
But it's like, are you really going to value yourself to the point where you will lower yourself to live in this existence with the one life that you have? And you're sitting there, and I guess, one of them was a meth addict because he had no teeth. And he mentioned that was, meth mouth. And it's like, and the other guy, that he's sitting there, I forget the guy's name, but the guy with no legs, who everyone thinks the tigers ate his legs.
He seems to be the most normal of all of them.
He seemed normal, but yeah, he's sticking around, and that's his life. And now in the after show, they talked to him a little bit, and all of them were like, "We're there for the cats. We're there for the cats." Okay, that's fine. I understand that you're there for a passion, because we always talk about take your passion and make it happen. But are you going to take it in that environment? It's like, again, you're wasting it. Why didn't that guy had the most sense? Why didn't he just leave?
Right, or why didn't he fight for the dysfunction that he saw happening? Why didn't he work to not destroy the farm, but why didn't he, if he saw, rather than saying, okay, I'm going to go into this dysfunction and take care of the tigers, why not on a bigger scale say, this is just madness, these tigers are being abused, and I'm going to work, on a bigger scale to help shut this whole thing down on a bigger scale? Because I guess if towards the last episode, Joe Exotic is giving PETA a lot of information about the trading, the illegal trading, and all the stuff that's going on, the terrible things that are going on with these tigers. Why not fight for it from that standpoint? Yeah. But he gets into the swamp, into the mud, and just sits with these with his nonsense, to save the tigers that are right there on that particular zoo. It doesn't make any sense.
I don't know. All I got out of it was polygamy, rampant drug abuse, animal abuse, and a bunch of crazy people that were wasting their lives for a year and a half, and maybe even more, depending on who they are. Because I think that Jeff guy is just
he's a complete user. And who the other thing is? Carol Baskin. She keeps saying, the tigers, shouldn't be in cages, but her tigers are in cages, and tigers, need to be free and they need to roam, but her tigers are not free and they're not like, she's also using people and exploiting people for her own gain. It's just nuts.
And apparently her tigers are well fed. Yeah. Because the rumor is that she
fed her husband to the tigers.
To it. It's just nutty.
It's the whole thing is nuts. Like, you can't even, I just shake my head. It just keeps getting more and more weird. And
So now my question is this: do you think the show would have taken off if everybody wasn't locked down? Because everybody's looking for two things. One, everybody's looking for something to do.
Right.
So somebody comes across a show and then they start putting it out there. And then two, everybody's need to fit in so that they can be in the know with what everybody else is doing. So they got to go watch it. So regardless of the fact whether they like it or not, see, for me personally, I don't have to be in the know and watch all the episodes so that I can say I watched it and I can talk about it with you. I just watched enough of it so that we can have this conversation for the podcast. Otherwise, I would have never watched it. And so, but other people have to watch it because they have to be in the know with everybody else and feel like they can be at the water cooler and talk about it with everybody else. I don't have to be involved in that conversation because I just don't have that need to be in the know and be like with everybody else talking about it. So I think the fact that one, everybody needs to be in the know together. I want to be like them, so I'm going to watch it. And then two, because we're on lockdown, people are looking for something to watch. So like, okay, I'll just watch it. I think that's the perfect storm that has exploded this show, because I don't really see why people are so excited about it.
Yeah, when I first started hearing about it, I said, I was listening to people describe it, and I said, ooh, that just sounds weird. Like, no, I don't want to watch that. Like murder for hire and polygamy and all this kind of, horrible things, the exploitation of the tigers and the abuse, and I don't want to watch that. But like you said, everybody was talking about it, and I was like, what is everybody talking about? Like, what is happening? So then when I started watching, I immediately was sucked in. I was totally sucked, because I'm a people watcher, and I'm fascinated with how people, I don't like reality shows per se. There's only a few that I watch, but I'm fascinated how people make decisions and how they lead their lives and how they choose to go about their business and how they, like he's embezzling funds and then he burns all the records, and like, that just fascinates me how people behave towards each other. And so for that, in that respect, I was totally sucked in. And honestly, it was something so out there that we were, every night you're like, okay, let's watch the Tiger King. Like 7 nights in a row, we sat, I know you're shaking your head at me. I was like, we were excited, like, okay, it's time for the Tiger King. It's like this drama, like this out there drama that's so different than the coronavirus and so far-fetched and so stupid and weird and crazy and fascinating and appealing.
Apparently with age does not come wisdom. Just saying. Okay, so now people.
How much older am I than you, by the way, or you don't want to say?
Not much. So people, what would you say for people that, okay, so I guess because I think I don't care what people do. The place should be shut down, because it's just animal cruelty right there. I'm surprised that the people aren't up in arms about everything that went on. Now, apparently the zoo, that Jeff guy still wants to keep the zoo open, but apparently it's on fumes. No one's really going, especially because of the lockdown. But if people go and support that and they go back to the zoo, and I know people have issues with zoos in general, but I think for the most part, zoos in general and those type of places are important, because we're starting to see animals on the verge of extinction come back. I'm not saying in this case, but we're starting to see places like zoos and other wildlife, natural habitat type places. We're starting to see animals on the verge of extinction come back. We're starting to see people do things to animals that are helping them with health and things like that. They'll capture them from the wild because they're injured, rehabilitate them, send them out. So I think there's a lot of good that does go with that. Although I did have a hard time growing up in LA, wondering why we had a polar bear at the LA Zoo. That just didn't make sense to me. But people that go to this thing.
Yeah, it's different.
Do you think that it's wrong for people to go support this particular zoo now after everything that you've seen?
The reason why that this people were supporting it is because they have interaction with these tigers. So they took the baby as soon as the tiger was born, these little cubs, they took them away from their mother and raised them apart from the mother, so that the people could come and have pictures taken and could play with the baby tiger. It's like a little kitten. And they're only good up for, I guess, until about 6 months, and then you can't do that anymore. I guess 6 months is pushing it. But up until at least 4 months, maybe 5 months, people would come in and we could have it like sitting right here on the table, and it would play just like a kitten. We could have our picture taken. That was the appeal and the fascination. And so they were showing, and I don't remember which episode it was, but they were showing all these people with pictures of them interacting and holding and petting these tigers. That's what people were after. So again, it's that selfish need. So we are using them, like they're not treating these tigers well, but we're accepting it so that we can have a picture with the tiger. So it's that's the whole fascination. It's like it's such a train wreck all the way around, because we know that it's wrong. We know that they shouldn't be in cages. We know that there's more. They said that the between these three parties, these three zoos, there's more tigers between the three of them in captivity than there are in the wild. And that's alarming. And we can say that like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. But let me have my picture taken. And even the news reporters, they would come and talk to the zoo, and they were like, oh my gosh, it's so cute. And they'd be playing with it. And because where else can you play with the baby tiger? So we are allowing it so that we can interact with the tiger, have a picture with it, and put it on our social media, that's where we come
Right. No,
in,
I get
and we're
it.
aiding and abetting.
Yeah, I get it.
We're
The
talking out of
hypocrisy is there.
it's
You have to
we're
admit
talking out
that's
of
just
both
pure
sides
hypocrisy.
of it is. We're talking out of both sides of our mouth. But that when you see, like, I don't remember which episode that's in. It's in one of the episodes where they have this whole conversation about, yeah, it's wrong, but people just can't get enough of it, and they just come because they can touch and hold a baby tiger.
So would you go take your picture and hold the baby tiger? You know you would.
Probably.
You know you would.
There's a place here in Acton where you can interact with animals. There's like a legit zoo out there somewhere in Acton. I don't remember the types of animals that are there, but yeah, you can go and interact and take pictures. I'm like, I think monkeys. They have some monkeys and.
See, I'm okay with monkeys because they're more human-esque. Mm-hmm. Now, it might be in the bonus episode, but there was a scene where these two chimps, or maybe I think they were chimps, they were in cages next to each other for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And they got hauled off to a gorilla farm, like a wildlife preserve, like a gorilla wildlife preserve. And they started hugging each other.
I know.
Gorillas.
They put them in the same cage, and then they immediately started hugging.
So that type of thing
cute.
is just sad because here you have, well, the whole thing is sad, to be honest. But with this particular thing, because the gorillas, the apes, the monkeys, they're more humanistic than a lot of animals, and they need that interaction. And here they didn't have that interaction for 10 years. And again, it just blows my mind that people will sit there and watch something, and yet they'll cry foul in other areas. But here it's totally acceptable,
right?
And
because we can participate.
Yeah, and
right?
it's just sad because, and I have a hard time going to the zoo. I love going to the zoo because I love sitting and watching the chimps. I mean, it's hilarious. Like the chimps will like throw things at you, until the LA Zoo built their new exhibit. And yeah, I might be supporting that whole thing too by going and watching them. But I also find it fascinating because the creation that they are, like an elephant should not be at a zoo. I'm sorry.
Right. But we go and see. Like, we go to the zoo because where else are we going to be up close and personal with all of these animals?
Right. And
so even the zoo, it's the same thing. We're being very hypocritical. Oh, they shouldn't be in cages, but we keep buying tickets and going and visiting.
But I think the difference is with the zoos, for example, there's still good going on. Like they're still doing research. They're still helping the animals. There's still some sort of good coming out of it.
We hope, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's
hope.
what they say. So that's what I will go by. I don't know any zoology society that is going to sit there and,
because SeaWorld said that they were doing research, and SeaWorld said that they were
there was a lot
doing
of abuse.
good, and there was a lot of abuse going on in there. So
there be some checks, but this is outright abuse for the sake of profit and for the sake of, like you said, Joe wanting to be a superstar, which I guess he is now, and he can't enjoy that because he's behind bars for the next 22 years.
He's in a cage. He keeps saying on the phone calls, "I'm in a cage. This is awful. No one should be in a cage."
But that's the other thing that I find fascinating is that, again, you get back to you have your one life that you're going to live. And what are you going to do with that life? Especially the people on the show that had the sense, at least they seem like to have the sense, to get out of there and go do something better with their life.
I don't know that they think that they can. Sometimes that's the fascinating part, is that if we believe, somebody said to me one time when they were getting married, like, I knew I shouldn't have married this person, but my thought process was that if I didn't marry them, then who else would marry me? Wow. And I would be alone. Somebody said that to me. And so I think it's that when we're so deep down in our, like, a low self-worth, it's like, well, what else am I going to do? Like when I went to the strip clubs, when we used to visit them on a regular...
She did not perform. Just get that straight.
No, I'm kidding. So when I went to the strip clubs, there were several girls and one of the female bartenders in particular. It's like, there's so much like, well, what else are we going to do? What am I going to put on my resume that I was a bartender in a strip club for 10 years? I have a degree or I have this, but who's going to hire me? I can't put any of this on my resume. And so the thinking is that there's nowhere for me to go. So it could be they're felons at the zoo and they have been in a lot of trouble. So it could be the thought process that this is the only type of
I get that, but look at what happened though.
Live.
Okay, so they were felons, and especially the guy that apparently was like hired to do the killing. I forget the guy's name.
Oh yeah,
The guy. And so, But it was like, okay, if you got out, you served your time, you get out. The thought to me would be, okay, I'm going to put myself in an environment where I'm not going to get sucked back into something because I have a record. Okay. And then the second time around, if something happens, because apparently there still could be some charges and some arrests and some things that come down from this still. The investigation is not over because this apparently just, Joe Exotic just got sentenced in January of 2020. So it's only been a couple months. And so there's still more to come, supposedly. So why would you put yourself in an environment that could put you back in prison or put you back susceptible to a crime or put you even in association with people that could affect you? You would think that you'd want to put yourself in any other environment, but yet go back to what you know. It's like going back to the streets, gang members. There was a guy, I don't know if you remember when the Rodney King riots broke out, there was the, I believe it was the Reginald Denny, who was, the brick was thrown at, the truck driver. I believe it was one of his attackers. Tukey Williams or Touchdown Williams, something like that. He was one of the guys that attacked the driver. So he went to jail, went to prison for that. Well, then in prison, he had a coming to Jesus moment where he wanted to redeem himself. And when he got out, he wanted to do great things and help the next generation of inner city. So he gets out, goes back to the inner city, ends up back in prison for life for murder.
Oh, no way. Yeah. I didn't know that.
So he ended up going back to his environment.
Wow.
And that environment then put him back in prison because he was surrounded by
He went back
people.
to the environment with the intent to do something good.
Well, I don't know. He just ended up back in that environment. And maybe in prison, his thoughts were, I'm going to try to do good. But regardless, whatever his intentions were, he went back to an environment where he wasn't prepared and ready for, and he ended up getting involved in some things and putting himself back in prison for life now.
Yeah, I think part of that, it doesn't make sense from where we are sitting, but I'm trying to put myself in a position of, looking at their life, where they come from. They may not have that thought process. That thought process may not have been instilled in them, or maybe they've tried some things and failed and just thought this is all that there is in life, or maybe they don't have the resources, people around them to help them, to choose a different path. And sometimes it's our intent, like we base ourselves on our intentions, like, oh, I'm going to be strong this time. I'm going to go back and, once I get out of jail, once I get out of rehab, I'm going to go back and I'm going to be strong. I'm not going to do that anymore. But like you said, when we put ourselves back in that same, environment, of course, the pull is there again. And then if we haven't worked to change our thought processes, we're just going to get sucked, right back into it. So we can say, we can have our intentions, say, oh yeah, I'm going to go back and help. I'm going to do good. But there's nothing really to support that intention. I mean, you have to be purposely do some things in order to overcome that environment. And I think people don't realize that, or maybe they feel like they're not going to be accepted if they go anywhere else, or this is all they know. It's dysfunctional, but it's comfortable. I know how the game works.
Yeah, see, I don't know.
Yeah, it's sad.
I guess I can't relate to that because I've been in environments, whether it be personal, family, whether it be work environments, and I've gotten out of it because it's just, the lunacy just doesn't make sense. Like you can't reason with the unreasonable. You can't make sense of the unsensible. You can't, let someone see your point of view when they can't rationalize. You can't rationalize with the irrational. And so, for example, there was this gal who I knew. She was a few years younger than me, and her mom had a best friend who was a heroin addict, and she was having a hard time getting off of heroin. So she decided that she would take heroin and that she would get addicted, I guess, and then get off of it to prove to her friend that you can get off heroin.
Oh my gosh.
Well, it didn't turn out well because she ended up ODing on heroin. And then her daughter, who turned out to be really good now, she's got a family and she's got a business and she's, out of the state, and she moved away and she got into a good environment. And fortunately, from my understanding, her grandparents pulled her out because she grew up in LA and she started getting involved in some things that she shouldn't have. And her grandparents eventually pulled her out and they went someplace else. And so they took her out of the environment that was a negative environment. So she actually had somebody looking out for her. Right. But I remember times chasing her down. She'd run away from her grandparents and I'd go look for her and I'd help the grandfather try to find her and have to talk her out of these situations. But it was all stemmed from the fact that her mom decided to get hooked on heroin to show her friend that she can get off of it, and then ODing. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I get the purpose behind it, but the way of going about it was completely wrong.
Right.
And now, years later, I actually, the gal came out a couple years ago, and I went and saw her and her family and her kids, and we went over to this lady's house that she kept calling her aunt, and so it finally clicked. That's the gal who was the friend that was on heroin.
Wow.
So we went to the mall because they want to go to the mall, and so I asked the gal, I'm like, hey, so is that your mom's friend? And she's like, yeah, that's the one that was hooked on heroin, and she's aunt. Whoever, because she felt the need to kind of take on the girl, but she finally cleaned up and got her life. But now even just her struggling with the fact that her friend, she lost her best friend because of heroin, because of her addiction, and her need to, super sweet lady. I mean, this is the only time I met her, super sweet. But even like you said, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, I'm trying to sit there and think about what she could even be going through all these years later, because we've all lost someone except for you. We've talked about it, death and loss of life and loss of relationships on episodes past. But, people that have lost somebody, you always kind of put yourself in a situation of, is there something I could have done differently that maybe helped where they'd still be here today type of thing. And with this gal, her heroin addiction caused the death pretty much, not really, but, in her mind, caused the death of her friend. And so her life that she's now living, she learned from the past. And like I said, it was a great experience being with them. And, but that's why I see these people. And it's like, yeah, you're in an environment where maybe you're a felon, and so the zoo's the only place you can work. But it's like, I don't understand the mindset that I can't do better. I don't understand that, because you can. There's always a place where you can do better. Even if you don't think you can, there is a place where you can do better. And I don't understand that mindset of, I can't do better, therefore I'm just going to do this.
So what if a person grew up with nobody believing in them? What if they grew up in a family where it was just dysfunctional, and they didn't get, love or respect, or they were just kind of, tossed around? Like, it has to come from outside of ourselves at some point, right? We have this innate ability, we talked the other day, to be resilient, but we still have to choose it. And I'm working on a post. I haven't done it yet because I keep getting distracted with my birthday. But I'm working on a post about resilience. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff underneath that has to be in place. There has to be tenacity. There has to be a worldview. There has to be purpose and vision. There has to be something that pulls you through. There has to be community. If people don't have that, if they've never been exposed to any type of education or any type of learning that there is a purpose, or you can have a vision, you can have a world, then they're just going to be in survival mode in their life. And that's where, and if you don't have an outside person or a group of people investing in you and saying, no, there's a different way, like, you can have hope and you can change your life and you can make things better. If there's nobody investing in you, and instead people are taking advantage of you, exploiting you, then you're going to be stuck in survival mode.
Yeah, I get that.
And that's kind of where I kind of see these people, is that they're surviving in the best way that they know how. And I don't think that mindset, like, someone has to, if they don't have anybody there encouraging them, then their self-worth has got to be in the tank. And so why would they think that they can rise above it if they hadn't seen anything? Or maybe they don't believe it, like maybe they don't believe that they're worth it.
Okay, you mentioned earlier that you would go into these clubs, adult entertainment clubs, and you would talk with the different gals there. Okay. I'm sure if you asked each and every one of them, for the most part, a majority of them would say there'd be some sort of abuse in their background. There'd be some sort of neglect. There'd be some sort of negative influence in their life that ultimately led them to be in the clubs, because that's where they found satisfaction. That's where they found the attention. That's where they found money. Maybe that's where they had fame, friendships, whatever, because I would imagine guys would come back and see them and so forth. In the adult film business, probably a lot of the same things. There was a time where I read a few biographies from people that were producing autobiographies that had come out of the adult world, adult film stars, strippers, things like that. And all of them, the common thread was abuse. As children. There was abuse, or they'd get in bad relationships, things like that. And so that type of situation is hard. However, they still found a way to get out of that. And so I understand the nature versus nurture part, and that if that's all they have and that's all they know, yes, it's going to be harder for them. But yet they're still surrounded by people that are doing things. Okay. So for example, in the show, you have the visitors that are coming to visit. You can't tell me that people aren't looking at the visitors coming to the zoo and being like, I wonder where they're going. Because you talk about people watching. I wonder what they're going. I wonder what they're doing. I wonder what life is like. They're not here. They can leave this dysfunction. Maybe they have dysfunction of their own, but maybe there's something better out there. Just by the people coming and visiting, they're being exposed to something completely different than what they're used to. Other people. And the thought of, I wonder what their life is like. I wonder if I could go talk to them. I wonder if I could just ask them something, because I'm sure they interact with these zoo visitors. So in the show, for example, I think there'd be plenty of opportunities for them to be like, okay, what is this person? What are these people doing? They're coming from other places here. There's got to be another life out there.
I think I'm going to take us back, because we talked about this several episodes ago, and I'm going to say something again. Sometimes when our shame is so deep, we just can't see the forest for the trees. And shame is like it's not, guilt is like I did something wrong. Shame is I am something wrong, right? So I've dealt with shame the majority of my life. Most of my years of life, I have dealt with shame. I'm better now. I'm not completely rid of it. I don't think any of us are ever going to be rid of it until we're on the other side. But on the scale of, I'm way further ahead than what I used to be. But when I was in that mindset, when I was deep, deep, deep in my shame, and I didn't go around saying out loud, oh, I'm so full of shame. I'm not good enough. But it comes out in our behaviors, the way that we relate to other people, the way that we either move or don't move through life. And I was stuck. I didn't move forward. And I thought that nobody wanted to be friends with me. I would take the kids to like soccer, the 6-week soccer thing, or swim lessons, or, whatever. And I would purposely not involve myself or interact too much with the other moms, because I'm thinking, okay, well, we're going to chit chat for 6 weeks and then they're going to be gone. They're going to leave me, because I had severe, rejection issues, abandonment, low self-esteem. And so we walk around with this mindset that we're just not, good enough now. And I couldn't move forward in my passions. I couldn't move forward in my dreams. I'm like, oh, that's never going to happen. So now, if you look at me, if you're watching us on YouTube, you're going to say, okay, that, how could I was always well put together. I was always had my hair and my makeup was always done. And so I had this false persona. People thought that I was all put together. I was fine, successful, just basing, on how I look, but I was a mess on the inside. And so where does this come from? It comes from messages that I was given when I was growing up. So on one hand, we were involved in the church. We were at church 6 different times a week, right? So I was hearing, but it wasn't it was more of kind of like I guess fundamental, like, I know that's going to take us down a whole nother train of thought. So I'll just leave it there. But then the messages that I was receiving, growing up, some of the messages were, don't try out for that. You're not going to make it. Don't apply to that college because you're not going to get in. And if you do, you'll fail out the first semester because you don't know how to study. You can't go into marine biology because you're horrible at biology and math. So now, were these people mean? No. Were they trying to hurt me? No. But did it destroy my soul? Yes. In a lot of ways it did. So I grew up with and plus a whole bunch of other things that happened, through the divorce and through all kinds of other stuff. Now I want to say that these, my parents are lovely people. I love them dearly. They're good people. But they also it's a legacy. This negative talk is a legacy that had been handed down. And so for many, many years, like I can put on, I can do my hair and my makeup, I can put on nice clothes, and I can look like I can go out in the world and get something accomplished, right, on the outside. But I didn't believe it on the inside. And so that's why it's taken me until today's my 53rd birthday, until today, until this season, for me to move forward and to not feel like that I'm an imposter, like I shouldn't really be here. And we even had a conversation off the air. Somebody said something to me yesterday, last night that took me right back. And I was so hurt and so devastated. I'm like, and then you had to give me like this pep talk, for an hour before we even started recording, because I'm like, okay, it's hitting that button again, that I'm not good enough, that I'm not going to accomplish anything. Is that true? No. But when we have that belief, when we have that thought process that we are defective in some way, it is so we cannot, it takes an outside, like you had to talk me off the ledge this morning, right? I was having a hard time doing that myself. I was doing it, but it would have taken me a lot longer to get there had you not been like, you're just I'm like, okay, good. I feel better. You're right. It would have taken me a lot longer to do that by myself. So when we have this thought process that we're not good enough, it causes us to sit down and to not do life. We don't move forward because we don't feel like we deserve it. We don't feel like we belong. We don't feel like we're good enough. And then other people say things that reinforce that, like the comment last night. I'm like, oh crap, here we go again. Those things, they get inside of us, and then it shuts us down emotionally, and we just cannot move forward. So when you say, I don't understand, like when I was deep in my shame, I wasn't doing anything except for playing the victim and trying to prove that I was good by talking too loud, by talking too much, by, telling stories about myself in order to prove that I was good enough, the things that we put out on social media. It's like, yeah, I'm okay, see, and trying to prove it all the time. I was behaving in a way that was incredibly insecure. And there was if you would have said, oh, you could do, whatever it is in life, you could be successful. I'm like, no, deep down, I might have said yes with my mouth, but my internal hard drive sabotaged me every single time. And that's why it's taken me all the way to 53. Now I'm finally sitting here doing a podcast, right? Now I did write a couple books along the way, late. But to do does that make sense? Like we can't, there's like this mechanism inside of us that it's like our internal hard drive, it's put in there, and that's what we believe. And so that's how we behave and move forward. So if we're believing that, we may look at other people and say, yeah, I wish I was successful like them, but that's not for me. So we don't go after it. We just stay where we are because that's where we belong. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's not healthy, but that's the mindset that I had. It's like, I don't belong there, so I'm not even going to try. Oh, see, I failed. See, there you go. I'm not good enough to do it. It's that self-fulfilling prophecy, that loop that we get into that is so destructive.
See, I find that interesting because I think I'm the opposite. I was telling you this in a conversation before. When I first got into radio, my first job was in Iowa, and there was a guy there that everybody thought was like the best guy. And so initially the thought is, okay, well, he's pretty good. Everybody likes him. Then that's just how it's going to be. But then the more I listen to just different people, I'm like, I could be that good, if not better. And so I'm going to set myself out to be better. Mm-hmm. And I went about becoming better. Mm-hmm. And of course it's subjective because it's, it's like, it's in the eye of the beholder. So was I better than him on the radio? That's irrelevant. But my thought process was, I'm going to set myself out to be better. Mm-hmm. I go to Nebraska. And Nebraska had a couple of radio stations where I was at in western Nebraska. And again, there was a morning show guy, and everyone thought he was like the bee's knees. Do we even say that anymore?
No.
I don't know.
You're so old.
But that's what it was. That's what it was when I got there. That's when I kind of first understood that term. And so I'm like, okay, if this guy's so hot stuff, that's great. And then that's how it is. But then the more I'd sit there and listen to him, I'd be like, I can be better than him. Mm-hmm. And so I set my mindset was I'm going to go out and be better than him. And I worked on my craft and improved. And even with other people in town, people start talking about this sports guy on this radio station. He's so good. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be better than him. Mm-hmm. And eventually people are going to talk about me as being really good. Mm-hmm. And so that was my mindset. And again, if it happened or not, it was irrelevant. By the way, it did happen. But the point was my mindset was changed. I was able to sit there and realize that, you know what, just because people say this is good, doesn't mean that I can't be that. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean I can't be better than that. So I'm going to set myself up to do better.
So what were the messages that your family gave you growing up? Were they like, go out and do it, you can do this? Was it like indifferent? Was it positive, negative, whatever?
Okay, it's interesting you say that because I went to private school and it was, I don't want to say dictatorial, but you did what everybody told you to do. Mm-hmm. And so there was no free of thought. Mm-hmm. And so the freedom of thought for me came in high school when I went to, again, more of a private school, but it was, I don't want to say liberal, but it was less constrictive in movement behavior. I mean, like, I didn't know what to do with myself with all this freedom. And so I'm like, wow, I walk to class. I have a locker. I don't need to raise my hand all the time. I don't need to ask permission for this, that, whatever. I had lots of freedom. And so it was through the high school process that I started to have this kind of freedom of thought of like, okay, I'm playing sports. Okay. I'm being encouraged. So to get back to your question, I'm being encouraged to do things. I'm being encouraged to try out for things. The realistic idealism of, okay, you may not be the best, but go do it and have fun. Go kind of like go do it for yourself. Mentality started to step in. And then when I got to radio, that's where things from the family really kind of got interesting because nobody had really done it before and it wasn't secure. It's not your 9-to-5 job. You don't work there 20 years and get a retirement and a cheap gold watch and the whole 401k package. It was a lot of uncertainty. And even as I look back on it, yeah, that's how life pretty much went, is what they thought it would be. But then once I got my first job, okay, so my mom was like, you should really get a degree. I had no interest in a college degree. But because there was really nothing brewing in radio, I'm like, okay, my mom wants me to get a degree, so I'll go to college and get a degree. So I open up the book. I'm like, which program has the least amount of units? I'm going to graduate with that degree. Then I got my job in radio. And then once they started to see that I could actually do something in radio, and I was actually pretty decent at it to start, because I'd worked to do that, then they were more accepting of the fact that, okay, yeah, he knows, because it's, again, their concern was for my well-being. They didn't want me to fail in something because it was the unknown. No one in my family had ever done anything like this. And so then I started to get better and better. And then they started to realize, oh yeah, he can do it. But it was always encouragement. It was always try it. But there was always some sense of like, we don't want you to just go fall flat. So we want to kind of give you the realistic of what could happen. Get a degree so you have something to fall back on, which, I'm glad I did, because it opened up a lot of doors. Education opens up a lot of doors that you might not know. So I always encourage education, even if you don't think it's needed. And then from there, it just kind of went. And I started to, once I moved to Iowa, then I really was like, okay, I'm on my own. There's nobody here to tell me nothing. I got to figure life out on my own. And that's when I started to really establish a lot of life's philosophies and things like that, and realize that no matter what anybody's doing out there, no matter what anybody's saying to me, I can kind of choose do I want to listen to them or do I want to do my own thing? And that's where we're talking about earlier. We're talking about the mask, wearing the masks out. I'm more of a free thinker, more logic, more reason. And I started to develop that and question what people would say, because when I was growing up, we just did whatever the teacher said because that was the rules. Even though they were right or wrong, it didn't matter. The teacher was always correct. Well, there were some things where the teacher was incorrect, but we couldn't question it.
Right.
But now that I'm older, I start questioning things, not too crazy. I didn't go rebellious, but you start to process things differently. And that's where, okay, this person's the best guy on the radio. We'll see about that. This person's the best guy in town about doing sports. We'll see about that. And I started to readjust myself to get myself to become that best one. And so that's why for me, it's kind of hard, and I understand it. And maybe that's just something I can't understand, where for you in your background, it was one way. For me, I was able to overcome a little bit of that, but yet I was able to have the mindset to change.
I think there's a whole bunch of things in your story that we could pick apart that we don't have time for. But I heard private school. I heard teachers, whether or not they were right or wrong, it was just their way. So there has started some authority issues. And then you had the freedom and you were encouraged to do things because you had some talent in some areas. And so you were encouraged to play that out, so to speak, on the field and whatever. And then that momentum kind of took you. So I do see, in you all of those traits today. I do see the combination of all those alive and well. And so I also look at people who just keep going. And we've talked about this before. You're like, okay, next thing. I lost my job. All right. Contract didn't get renewed. Next. Like you just don't skip a beat. I don't understand that philosophy. I don't get it, because I didn't come from, I have to give myself a pep talk and talk myself off the ledge and do all of these meditational things and pray and read my Bible and listen to all kinds of inspirational things so that I don't get sucked back into all of that, that mindset, because I will stop. I will not move forward. I'll just sit down on the sidewalk. So I don't understand people who can just be like, okay, next, I'll just move on. I don't get it. So and I think, and I have a friend, well, we're not really friends anymore, but I have a previous friend, and she used to say the same thing. It's like, well, I just don't understand, because she was also kind of supported and encouraged, and things were that, they have a military background, and so things were just kind of, just do this or whatever. But she has this strength inside of her, this kind of like a, way that you just move on, because a military family, they moved a lot. So she just has a tough, she's got a wall around certain things, and she just keeps, just moves on. And she's like, I just don't understand, when you say things like that, I don't understand what you're talking about when you have all this shame and it stops you and you just can't move forward. That's fine. Like, you don't have to understand it. She doesn't have to understand it. But I know that is something that is true. I know, because I've experienced it, and I'm assuming that other people have experienced it as well. And it's why we stay in relationships, it's why we marry people that we shouldn't, because, this person said, who else is going to marry me? It's why we stay in jobs that we hate, because we're either afraid to go look for something else, or it's like, okay, I have a paycheck. I don't want to risk doing something that I really want to do, because what if I'm rejected? I don't want to ask this person out. What if they say no? There's all these things that trip us up when we have that deep, shame in us, that we don't have the mindset that we can be in that. Like, sometimes I'll look at circles of people and I'm like, I don't belong there. They're way above my pay grade. I don't do that as much, but I definitely did that before. Like, oh gosh, I can't hang with these people. Like, I'm not good enough. Really? That's just stupid. But that's how I felt. So there's just a part of us that if that is put upon us, that there's just a part of us that believes us that we're not equal to our peers. We're not keeping up with our peer group. We're not as good as everybody else. We haven't accomplished as much. That's why people don't go to reunions. Like, my high school reunion is coming up this year. It's probably not going to happen now because of coronavirus, but in past reunions, people have said, oh, privately, I don't want to go because I haven't accomplished as much as so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. So I'm embarrassed to go, or I've gained too much weight, or it's that shame that we feel like we're not acceptable the way that we are, and we can't hang, with everybody. And it's so sad. But so I have you now. Right. You're dragging me. I am literally riding on the great Son Edam's coattails, and he's pulling me through.
She's got a fan base of her own. Quick thing about the reunion. So the 10-year, it was like that. Everyone was like comparing. I'm this, I'm that, with that. The 20-year, half of us were unemployed because a lot of us worked in the entertainment field, and that was about the time that Obama came into office and the whole entertainment field collapsed. Yeah, we all got laid off. So the 20-year, we were all unemployed, and it was funny because someone asked me, "Hey, Son, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Yeah, I got laid off." They're like, "Really?" I'm like, yeah. And I was thinking about, too bad. I'm like, yeah, I did too. And someone's like, oh, you did too? I did too. Next thing you know, we're all like, hey, we're all laid out. You got a job, dude? You're weird. You got a job? What's wrong with you? Why do you have a job?
Probably nobody would have said anything had you not been brave enough to say I got laid off.
I got laid off. I don't care. That's the realities of it. But here's the one thing I do learn as we wrap up. Okay, I don't understand the thought process and the mentality, like you said, just like you might not understand mine or your friend might not understand you. I do understand this. We can, even though we don't understand, we can be a positive influence on anybody we come across if we have the understanding that I'm just going to try to motivate, influence positively, have some sort of positive impact on somebody. Mm-hmm. Okay, whether it's encouraging them to try to go for their goals, whether it's encourage them, hey, you can get out of it. It could be something as a simple passing where I maybe say something to the effect of, hey, whatever you want to do, take your passion and make it happen. Or it could be something a little bit more involved. I just recently came out of a job where I was a professor at a college, and I was helping students with radio. And a lot of them, the first time they sit down at the mic, I can't do this. Mm-hmm. By the time they entered the program, dude, they were like Ryan Seacrest, And so that's the thing, getting them. And so whatever we do in life, no matter who we come across, we should always have the mindset, whether we understand them or not, is treat them with respect and as a human, and they have value, whether it's a Joe Exotic or whether it's anybody else. They're human, they have value. Mm-hmm. 2, let's be a positive influence on them so that when they remember us, They remember us for something positive we did and not something negative. And 3, we may never know the impact we have on somebody, like the fruits of our labor. We may never see, we may never understand, but years down the line, someone might have a change of attitude, thought, heart, lifestyle, and it comes back to your interaction with them.
Isn't it Maya Angelou that said people will not remember what you say to them, but they will remember how you made them feel?
It could be.
That's that influence that you're talking about, having that positive influence on people and having respect for them and engaging with them and encouraging them, because you might be the only person because we all need that outside person to pull us along, and you might be that person. And it's not necessarily like, oh, I don't know how to encourage someone with my words, but it's just your aura. Like if you believe in them and you're there encouraging them and cheering them on, that's what they're going to remember, and that's what they're going to take with them and take their passion and make it happen.
Charisma is the word of the day.
Yes.
Be that charisma influenced on somebody else, because that will then get them maybe excited, if not for something immediate. You might be planting seeds that down the road might blossom into something where it's a life-changing event for them. You could be the life-changing event that someone needs in their life. And so just be that positive influence, because you never know, there might not be anybody else. Something as simple as a, hi, how you doing today? Something as simple as a smile. In this day and age of the coronavirus, I've learned to have a lot more patience. So, hey, why don't you go first? Hey, why don't you take the shopping cart? Hey, it's the last roll of toilet paper. Hey, why don't you take it? Whatever. Simple stuff, but you never know what that impact might have.
Right.
To then invest in somebody's lives from day to day. That's why we have AA. Someone is investing in the life of somebody else. That's why we have counselors, therapists, things like that. People are investing in the lives of somebody, which at this point is usually they're coming out of something negative. So why don't we be the opposite and try to, before that person gets into the negative, be that positive influence on them, because you never know when you're going to impact somebody.
Right.
And make it a positive impact.
Right. Absolutely.
So take your passion, make it happen. Let yourself be great. If you don't think that you can do it and you need encouragement, we're here. Our Instagram is at 2 Steps Ahead Podcast. 2 Steps Ahead Podcast. You can DM us, reach out to us through there.
TWO, 2 Steps Ahead Podcast.
Yes, TWO, 2 Steps Ahead Podcast. My personal Instagram is at Edem Rocks, EIDEM ROCKS. And you can reach out to me there. If you want to email the show, if you're old school, 2 Steps Ahead Podcast at Gmail. TWO, 2 Steps Ahead Podcast at Gmail. And you can send us a message there. And your Instagram? My
Instagram for my 3 friends. Thank you so much for my 3 fans. Tara Hoke Shiro, TaraHokeschiro. And
hey, hit her up with birthday wishes on Instagram.
I was just going to say, you could wish me happy birthday, but by the time this comes out, it'll be
that's okay. You can
a couple of days past.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares what it is. Hit her up, say hi, give her birthday wishes, and we like to thank you for listening. We're on all the major platforms, Spotify, SoundCloud. In fact, SoundCloud is linked in the bio of my Instagram and 2 Steps Ahead Instagram. Pandora, Google. You can just do, hey Siri, hey Google, hey Alexa, play 2 Steps Ahead Podcast, TWO, 2 Steps Ahead Podcast, and we pop up. And so we're everywhere. YouTube, just search us and you'll find us. 2 Steps Ahead Podcast, highlighting the stuff we've stepped in so you don't have to. Let yourself be great. Take your passion. Make it happen. Thanks for listening. Do tell a friend, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us.